So a hot tip for first home buyers, right?
You know, there was that old show, it was like location, location, location. Like, I think you've got to look for these locations that have in the local area a bad reputation for probably a silly reason. There'd just been a shooting in the area. Oh, it's unheard of, you know. You look at it on paper and you're like, schools, close to the highway. There's a lot of growth in nearby suburbs, which are a little bit higher price. It's actually a really nice on paper area. A lot of shops around the place. It's well developed, up and coming community. And you've got to sort of back yourself. I think other people haven't quite got it right.
Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Sean Wilson. I'm from Wilson Design and Build, and this is a good friend of mine, Mr. Daniel Collins. He is a avid property investor and is actually a repeat customer of ours at Builders Brisbane, which is the investment side of our building company. And he's already built, what is it, 1, 2 granny flats?
Yeah, 2 granny flats. Dual key place as well, not through Builders Brisbane. Yeah, I think the portfolio is sitting at 10 dwellings now, 7 different properties. At one stage, it was up to 12. I sold a few.
Amazing.
Been on a bit of a journey.
We're just coming off the back of the second build that you've done with us, which
completed like a month ago.
And you did it while you were having a baby.
Yeah, that was
that process was happening.
Maybe a little foolish, not really foolish. No, it was really good. Happy to talk about my experiences, my journey.
So. Well, I'm very excited to hear about it, and I'm sure a lot of our customers are as well. We deal with so many different property investors from all different backgrounds, and so I guess that leads into one of the first things I wanted to talk to you about was how did you start the property investment journey? How old were you? What was your first purchase like, and what were the feelings like? Probably the environment was a little bit different back then, right? So could you speak to a little bit about that, but also some background about yourself, who you are, what you do, all that sort of thing?
So. Sure. So I'm a teacher, science teacher. I'm actually working as the deputy principal now in a small regional town of Queensland. I love to travel. I've lived in America for some time, Sweden for a couple of years with my wife. We've been married about 7 years now, got one son, 6 months old, doing really well.
That's awesome.
UK for a little bit. So I've always been sort of curious. I love to explore, experience new ideas. And I think when I was 20 years old, just got my first job teaching at a great school on the Gold Coast, but it was an hour travel from Brisbane every day.
Yeah.
And at the time I was dating who I thought was going to be the girl of my dreams. She got a job on the north side and I was traveling an hour in the opposite direction. Needless to say, it didn't work out. And so all this money I'd been saving for this engagement ring, I was like, well, what am I going to do now with it? But I used the time on that drive to learn, and I was listening to podcasts, things I'm interested in, history, science, but also property investing.
Yeah.
Just started I listened to this property, I think it was called Everyday Property Investing. And there was a fellow teacher who'd been investing in property for maybe 10 years, had a number of investment properties, someone who worked at a middle level IT role. And they said that you could do it too. And I thought, okay, well, maybe that's something I'll do in the future. And then the Queensland government was going to end the first home buyers grant, which they subsequently reinstated and made bigger. But back at that time, you could buy it for any property. And I thought, well, that's I think it was going to be $7,000 or something towards the first home. And I think I'd saved a meager $12,000. It wasn't very much for this engagement ring. Just started
Still
teaching.
solid though.
Yeah,
solid number.
I guess I used to go to the shops. My friends would be having the Maccas or whatever it was at the time, and I have like a little lunchbox there with a sandwich that I made from home to scringe and save. Like that's sort of my mindset, So $12,000, we did it. But yeah, bought this investment property, $235,000 at 3-bedroom townhouse, 2.5 bathroom in a cul-de-sac there, and it was. I remember signing that contract, with the weight of what am I about to do. I managed to live in the house for a little bit, and then I didn't have to commute for so long every day.
That's great.
And that was enabled me to get the first home buyers grant.
What suburb was
Pacific Pines.
Pacific Pines, okay.
Yeah. And so it's about like 15 minutes drive to the beach when there's no traffic, probably a bit more when there is traffic.
Beautiful.
And at the time it was a bit of a dodgy suburb. It still's not the best suburb, but it's certainly.
Apologies to everyone from Pacific Pines.
Well, at the time it just had a shooting, like literally someone, and that was like unheard of, and so the property prices was quite down. And I'm like, everyone on the Gold Coast, like, oh, Pacific Pines, like, it's actually pretty well located, and it's quite close to the highway, vein of the Gold Coast. You can get, to Brisbane pretty easily. And I thought it was a good location. I thought it was undervalued. And I turned out to be right because it went up capital growth more than, I guess, the baseline for the area. And then that enabled me to buy my second investment property, a house in Eagleby, which coincidentally just now is the one I put the granny flat in the back of.
Yep.
And then, buying a few other properties along the way.
Yep.
And
so
just
how old
learning
were
a lot.
you with the Pacific Pines?
20 years old, maybe just 21.
And money down for that deal?
Like 12 grand of my own money.
12 grand? Yeah.
Yeah, it was a 95% loan with the home guys grant to cover like stamp duty. Oh, actually, we didn't have stamp duty because my first
home buyers, no stamp duty.
Yeah.
As long as you live in it?
Yeah. And I think my wage at the time was 55 grand as a first year teacher.
It's a great strategy. So, I did the same thing. First property, principal place of residence, jump on in, first home buyers grant, the whole thing. And then, equity growth, take that into the next property.
Go from there.
Yeah,
I really recommend it to people starting out. You can think creatively. It can be an investment, but maybe at first it's something that you actually move into to build the incentives, get on the ladder somewhere. It doesn't have to be the dream house. Right.
For us, it was in an area that when I called the Logan City Council, I remember this conversation still to this day. I spoke to the lady at the front desk there about putting an application in to build the property and the plumbing application. And I mentioned the suburb and she said to me, and I said I was a builder. I didn't say I was a homeowner. She said, such a shocking area, that one. That's what she said to me. I still remember it to this day. I think, my goodness. And it's so similar, like your story with the Pacific Pines property.
Yeah, I would never build there. Oh, wait a minute.
Goodness, I would never.
Suddenly, it's gone up a ridiculous amount. And
so a hot tip for first home buyers, right? Use those government grants and get in something that is probably not the most ideal to start with, but not the dream home at least. But
and you've got to like there was that old show. It was like location. Like I think you've got to look for these locations that have in the local area a bad reputation for probably a silly reason. Like there'd just been a shooting in the area. Oh, it's unheard of,
Yeah.
But you look at it on paper, and you're like schools. It's close to the highway. There's a lot of growth in nearby suburbs, which are a little bit higher priced, but it's actually a really nice on paper area. A lot of shops around the place. It's well developed, up and coming community. No, I think, and you've got to sort of back yourself. I think other people haven't quite got it right. And I think, if you're someone who's like newly moved to the area, like let's say you haven't grown up in the area, you might be able to see those things that other people can't.
100%.
And I was like that, not that I'd grow up in Brisbane, but I wasn't new to the Gold Coast. I remember people complaining about their 15-minute drive to work. Like, I have to drive 15 minutes. Traffic was so much. I was like, what are you talking about? 15 minutes is nothing. Oh, you live so far away. Pacific Bus, 15 minutes away. That was the mindset at the time on the Gold Coast, and I just thought, no, this is ridiculous. It's going to change.
Yeah.
And it did.
And it did. Yeah. So what was it like for the people around you? You mentioned your friends eating out, you're bringing in a lunchbox. What was it like, your friends' reactions, potentially partners, girlfriends? You said your partner was out of the mix, but maybe there was another person interested. What, your parents? Parents can be a big...
well, they were very supportive of my first investment property because they'd done something similar. Like they'd had an investment property and had currently one investment property, and so they were very like, no, this is good. We've benefited from that. So I had that I guess example set for me. But I was the first of anyone I knew to have a home. I think I was the first person in my network. But then the second and the third and the fourth, there was a lot of resistance. And even at the time from like people at my church or other places, like, oh, property investing, oh, very risky. It's always going to go down. It's a bubble. And I was like, I don't think so. Like,
it's always a bubble.
Yeah, I don't. I think 200. Like you couldn't even I think you couldn't even build a property for that price in the suburb. At that time anymore. And I just thought, no, Yeah, you have to take a risk. And I've sort of been of the mindset though, I think in the way the world works now, if you don't take a risk, that's actually the biggest risk of all. Like not taking a risk is more risky than, like do your research. You know, I think I listened to 70 something hours of property investment podcasts.
Yep.
Before I felt confident enough to be able to back myself. So it wasn't like I was making a roulette wheel spin and hoping for the best. I felt like I knew the tax system. I knew what I was getting myself into. I knew how depreciation worked. I knew how I'd visited a number of different properties. I'd done some projections for the cash flow, and it was cash flow positive or not close to it after tax. I decided that no, with education, because I think what is it? With education's a way to mitigate risk. You know, like everything's risky for someone who doesn't know about it.
Yes.
But when you do your research, research mitigates risk. Let's say that.
100%.
Yeah.
100%. Yeah. I sort of have the same mentality, and I love that you mentioned that you listen to so many podcasts while you were traveling. You know, being a builder, we travel job site to job site so much, and I think one of the great tips that I got from someone was listen to history podcasts. So I found this guy, Dan Carlin, great history podcast. And the mentality of people does not change over time. And that's what I found. It just repeats itself. And so, you know, the advice that you got, oh, it's risky, all this, all that, you know, it's a bubble. At some level, yes. But on many other levels, people have been saying that for hundreds of years.
Yeah.
And so my dad had some great advice for me as well regarding property, is time is a great equalizer. And so that is something that was very encouraging to me, because he's bought a property that was at the time, and he's a property investor as well, but he bought a property that was overpriced at the time, just because of the rental yield that was padded by the guy who sold it. So it was a little bit suspect and illegal, but regardless, he bought it based on those facts, and now he sold it for 70% capital gains.
Yeah,
it's fantastic, you know, result. Took him 8 years to do it, but in the meantime, he did not let that bring him down and bring down his views or what he had learned. Instead, he took what he had learned and he rolled that into future things, which worked out very well. And so, yeah, I 100% agree with what you're talking about. And this entire time, so you're a school teacher still?
Yeah.
Down at the Gold Coast. Yeah. So you're earning a teacher's wage.
Yeah. And no help from my parents financially, apart from the fact I was living at home, which is actually a massive help.
It's huge, yeah.
I wasn't going out, drinking and partying and going to the clubs. Like occasionally you'd have a great time. But, there's this idea of delayed gratification. But because I think I delayed gratification in my teens and in my early 20s. So by the time I got to my late 20s, I was able to do a lot of travel. You and I have been to some pretty cool places together.
Oh man, yeah.
and it was actually because of the investment portfolio and the gearing of that that enabled me to have those awesome experiences. Like I've literally been to 70 different countries around the world.
Yeah.
Most of Europe, Southeast Asia, Asia, South America. As I said, I've lived in 4 different countries and worked. Having that extra cash flow through the property investment that I was able to get in my early 20s. I could have invested further in my late 20s and probably been in a slightly better position now. But for me, I do value learning, travel, experiences, and that's what I get from it. So,
everything's a balance, right? You can completely optimize for the property investment side, and then just let lived experience, relationships, and other things fall by the wayside. So, I think a life well lived is something, a life well balanced.
Yeah. And,
I've been the victim of being completely unbalanced. And, potentially you've, found that or seen that in other people as well. So I think it's very good to say like, oh, well, maybe I've got 5-6 investment properties. I can go on a sabbatical for 6 months. And that itself is great because you just get such a fantastic view of how other people live and what other people's mentalities are. And so I found while traveling, being in Greece and Barcelona and all that, it's like, yeah, this is great. But man, the beaches in northern New South Wales, and
Yeah.
the Gold Coast are
Solid.
actually world class.
Yeah.
You know, traveling around Italy and being like, man, I really, really miss an Australian latte. Like, and I'm in Italy. This is
what's going on?
This is a bad feeling. But also there's so many other fantastic things that we don't have that is over there. So, but yeah, I mean, that's been amazing. So when you went and got your first loan, what was that like dealing with the bank? Because that's really a major.
Yeah.
And what was it like financing your subsequent purchases? How did you go about that? And what were the relationships that you built? What were the strategies that you employed? How did you go through that?
No, that's a good question. I wasn't trying to overcapitalize by any means. I was buying a fairly cheap property in an area which didn't have a strong reputation. So the first property was fairly straightforward to finance, and it was a principal place of residence. The second was probably the most difficult. And I think I would have been rejected 5 or 6 times before I found a bank, and more importantly, someone from that bank willing to work with me.
Yeah.
Because I think, I was actually told by people, like, you'll never get a loan. Like, no bank will lend to you. That's what this person from Suncorp said to me. And I went, like, literally, it was at the shops, went next door. And I think you can, there's sort of two different angles of advice that I would give to someone trying to go through some finance based on my experiences. Well, actually, maybe backtracking a little bit. First of all, you've got to find someone who's willing to believe in you and work with you. Because if you're looking to do something outside of the box, it's a lot of work for someone from a bank to work through the application, to put something forward, to work through, this flood thing or this and all this risk, and we've got to work out, put an exception in. So a lot of people, they'll reject you not because it's like actually impossible. It's just, why would I go for you and spend all this time and effort with you when I could just find a first home buyers really easily and do 5 of them? So you got to find someone who believes in you. You can find someone at an individual bank who knows their particular bank really, really well. And that was NAB for me at the start. Was this one branch, this one manager who was fantastic. And actually when he left the branch, I found, I need to suddenly look elsewhere, because it was actually more about him working with me, believing in me. But then you might find someone like that. And then there's also brokers, because I feel like brokers, they're like, if you've ever been on TV or in the media, like, they give you a bit of makeup before you go out there. I was once on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, and I actually had full-on makeup. Like, they gave me actually this shirt. Coincidentally,
this very shirt, ladies and gentlemen,
this very shirt was from Channel 10 in Melbourne. I was on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire and botched the last question, just by the way, missed out on 50 grand. It was the worst. But yeah, they put this shirt on because they didn't like the shirt I had, like stylists. And so, like, that's what a mortgage broker will do for you. They'll put your best face and your best image, and maybe, hide the acne scar or the hairline or whatever, and fill it in. And so they know CommBank, this is what they like. This is what they're attracted to in a lender. And so if you can find a good broker, then go for it. But don't take no for.
No doesn't mean no.
No doesn't mean no
to investments.
Yeah, just back yourself and keep pushing. Like, and expect 20% approval rating is like, I get rejected 5 times, and in the 6th time, or 4 times, and the 5th time I get accepted. Like, that's what you've got to expect. So be comfortable with that.
100%. Yeah, I mean, boxers have a worse hit rating, right? It's like they might swing a whole bunch of punches and a few of them land.
Yeah.
And it's like, man, and they're world-class athletes. And then you're expecting to throw a couple of punches and then just give up?
Yeah.
It seems crazy, right? When you put it in that context. So you went through to NAB, found someone that was willing to work with you. I actually did the same thing. Sandy from Westpac in Garden City, big shout out. She was awesome, and we worked on some strategies together and ended up making something happening. And she was the regional manager of Westpac at the time, has subsequently left. So who knows where she's at? But if she hears this, and thank you, Sandy, for believing in me. And we made it happen. And so now I'm with a mortgage broker who's great. And like what you said, it's I think a mortgage broker is also really good because they give you so much. If you ask the questions, they can give you so much knowledge and information.
Yeah.
I think one of my biggest things was finding someone who was at the place where I wanted to be.
Yeah.
Rather than working with an accountant who just had one property that was negatively geared and was going broke, it was like, okay, who can I work with that is at the level that I wanted to be at?
Yeah, you need advice from people who walk the walk.
100%. 100%. So what sort of led you down? So you've bought like a couple of properties now, and they're all just houses on blocks of land, already established homes. So I'm guessing at least 15, 20 years old sort of vibe.
Yeah. I mean, the townhouse, I think, was built in the thousands, and the other one in the probably early thousands, late 90s somewhere. So it wasn't. Yeah. But
Not
yeah,
too
they were
old,
established
but
houses.
established
It wasn't
properties.
new. Yeah.
So what drew you to the whole concept of granny flats?
Well, I think I was fortunate enough to find property investing in Southeast Queensland when the average purchase price to wage in certain areas was, 20 minutes, 30 minutes drive from the capital city centre was affordable on a teacher's wage. But then as the property prices have gone up, that means the yields have typically gone down.
Yes.
So you can look to regional towns. I'm living in a regional town at the moment. There's some fantastic yields out here. You don't need to look at a dual key situation. But eventually, as the portfolio grew, as the yields in general started to decrease, at least in the areas that I was interested in, you need to be creative and looking at some ways to maximize the cash flow, the yield, and that helps with serviceability and a whole host of other things to keep growing the portfolio.
Yeah. That's one tip my broker gave to me is every dollar you earn is $5 worth of loan that you can get.
Yeah.
So
at 20%,
upping that cash flow is a huge, huge boost. And so you started thinking about potentially increasing the cash flow of your properties. I mean, did you go down this whole idea of maybe share houses? Like, what drew you to actually potentially building?
I don't like share houses in terms of like one person. I just think that would be a nightmare to manage. I have a very busy. I could employ someone to do it. For me, maybe one day, but I think there's a few reasons that.
Well, how did you hear about, say, like building a granny flat or a dual key property?
Like an investment podcast, it would have been.
Yeah, okay.
For sure.
So he's still on the podcasts.
Yeah, still listening.
He's successful. He's bought a bunch of properties. He's got these contacts in the
changes. Yeah, you got to keep growing.
All these contacts, amazing. So you're still learning, and you're learning about this new strategy.
Yeah,
and I think that was way back then, as when I think you had met your future wife, Alex.
Yep.
And she mentioned me or something like that.
Yeah, well, she knew you from church, and she said, and we were looking to buy our first home together, and I thought, I'm not at a position yet where I could blow all my cash and like sell my properties and buy like a dream first home and settle down, and that's not me. I'm a bit too adventurous for that. I knew that we were going to do some more overseas travel, and we still will, and maybe even in the future live overseas. So I thought, let's buy a house that's good, but I want that house to one day transition into an investment property. And so I was looking for houses that had like the house really far to the back or really close to the front, where I could easily put a dual living situation on there, a granny flat on the back. But I didn't know, like, because you can learn about it on a podcast, but then the Logan City Council, the Redland City Council, Ipswich City Council, they have very different ways of doing things, and I wanted some personal advice. And I think I'd found a property that I was curious about to see if it would work. And then that's where actually I met you. And I remember walking in that business meeting, meeting you for the first time. Little did we know we'd end up being great mates in the future, It's cool. Yeah. And I think I actually asked about some specific questions about that house, which I didn't end up buying, fortunately. But I ended up buying. But that helped. That was actually, for me, it was networking. It was learning. I can't remember the specifics of what I would have got from that conversation, but I eventually did buy a house which we lived in for probably a good 4 years. And then towards the end, before we moved to Sweden, that's when we said, okay, now's the time. Let's build that dual key granny flat on the back. And we did that with Builders Brisbane. It's been very good. Very good.
Yeah. So that was a property in Slacks Creek.
Slacks Creek. Yeah.
Yeah. Amazing purchase.
Oh yeah.
I love finding properties where you just go on RP data and you look at the median price of suburbs, and then you just arbitrage median price discrepancy versus distance from each other.
Yeah.
So like for me, a great example of that is like that Browns Plains area versus the Sunnybank area. It's like the discrepancy is ridiculous when you look at those two suburbs.
Are they like quite close to each other in terms of?
Very close to each other. There's just a highway that splits them.
Yeah.
And it was the same thing with Slacks Creek and something like Daisy Hill.
Underwood, nearby suburbs.
Underwood. It was unbelievable.
Oh, you were paying over
difference.
that. You literally like 100, and I purchased this place literally like 200 meters from the border in a very good pocket of Slacks Creek. Yeah. And you go 200 meters, you're paying 200 grand more for the same house.
Very easily.
With probably even less land and things like that.
Yeah.
And just, this will be interesting. I actually bought it the first day it was listed without even having visited the property. Did
we do a property assessment for you on?
I think maybe you did later, but I was already well aware of the
requirements,
the potential.
You got some, let's just say, education.
Yeah,
from us. Yeah. Because we'd already been going through at least one property, maybe a couple. Because I do remember there were some follow up emails after that meeting.
There was.
So you had some pointed questions about that specific property, and then we spoke about some other properties as well, and I gave some of the reasons why. And how you would do things and what would be the things that would trip you up. So that seemed to give you the confidence to just pull the trigger on something as soon as it was listed, right?
Yeah, and I could put it subject to building and pest. And so there was no...
The greatest clause on the face of the earth.
Yeah, like you can use anything for that. Or maybe I even had it subject to finance. Actually, I don't think I did to get it over the line.
Yeah.
And I played this is my family home card with the real estate agent. We're in her office that very afternoon signing the contract before I'd even stepped foot on the property. But the photos were excellent.
Yeah.
I could look at dial before you dig. I could look for pipelines in the backyard. So I was able to do all that research very quickly, get 90% of the way there, put the contract on, and then figure out the rest later. And like that enabled me to get because it was underpriced too. So I was able to get it for probably, 10% cheaper than what it probably was worth.
I just recently purchased a property without even seeing it. I just recently did the same thing. It's just look at the fundamentals, because I look at it, we have a lot of investors from interstate and overseas, right? Like probably 50% of them are from Sydney, and then probably the other 30% of them are from overseas or Melbourne or Adelaide or whatever it might be. So they do it all the time. And I'm like, wow, why do I have reservations? Why do I need to set foot on this property? I just have a look at it and run it through the same process that we do in our business. Take it through that due diligence phase, like what you did. And then, okay, great. It ticks all the boxes. Let's get this contract signed because the value is there, and then figure out the rest later, which are all details. And, might need a bit of a repaint, or, a little bit of the gardening might need weeding or something like that. It's very surprising how those small things can really turn off a buyer rather than the fundamentals.
Yeah.
So I love being a property investor, going and finding a property and then basing your decision off of the fundamentals rather than what you can touch, see, smell, and hear, because that all affects your sensory and your emotions.
Yeah, you got to keep the emotions out
invested.
of it. Yeah. Well, there's times when you want emotions in it, particularly when you're selling or you're attracting like a certain tenant.
Oh, for sure.
But you've got to look at even the emotions through a logical lens. Like what I can use this emotion at a certain price through the landscaping to attract a certain increase in rental yields or quality of tenant, and calculate it. So it's weird how. I wouldn't necessarily recommend that for your first or even your second, but once you've become a bit experienced, you know what you're doing, or you feel confident, definitely step out.
Or you've got a great team backing you with a track record.
That's true. Yeah,
that's huge. I think property investing is very much a team effort.
Yeah,
as well. So can you describe your experience? I got some predefined questions here, just so everyone knows why I'm reading off my phone. Can you describe your experience working with Builders Brisbane on your first granny flat? What was that like? I mean, actually, that is quite intense, right? Because you're moving not only overseas, but over continents, and over hemispheres.
Yeah.
Right. So what was that whole process like for you, if you can?
I think we finished before we moved, which was good.
Yeah.
But I was living in the property at the front. One of the first things that came up was the fence from memory, or maybe it was the slab by itself. It's all, can't quite remember, but Oh, no, it's just every day. Oh, look, that's the slab's down. Oh, there's some bricks that have been delivered.
It's usually what happens when you're building.
And I think if you're not in the building industry, you think like a lot happens at the start, and then it slows down as they do the internal finishings, and you go, oh, it's like it's about to be done.
Yes.
And then there's a little bit more, and then you see the finished product, and you're like, oh, okay, no, this is fantastic.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. Well, I usually say to clients, once we have everything on the outside done, we're about halfway there.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you think you're like, well, it's windows and
Like,
walls,
wow, it's that
and
enclosed
roof.
stage. It's like,
Yeah.
yeah, well, we're halfway there.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's can be very surprising to people. But yeah, I think we got yours built in, I think 3.5 or 4 months or something like that. So
It was very quick.
it's decent
Yeah.
turnaround.
No, I've been very happy with Builders Brisbane.
And you got it rented out
Yep.
right away.
Yep.
Great tenants.
Oh, yeah.
And then moved overseas to live the dream.
Yeah, it sounds very ridiculous when you put it like that. But yeah, I remember for some reason I decided to do the landscaping myself to save a few dollars, which is in
Very
hindsight
savvy property investor.
probably stupid. And I had this like guy I found on Gumtree like doing the rocks, and then he's like, yeah, I'll come back, and he's like hasn't come back. I'm like messaging him from Sweden like, when are you going to do the rocks, mate? And he eventually came, and at that stage I think no one wanted to work because it was what is the government thing that they did at the time? JobKeeper or something. So,
yes.
yeah. So
yes,
just,
that's right.
I was just
COVID's happening at this point.
Oh yeah, it's all.
Yeah, that's right.
It was all
forgot about
happening.
that. My goodness.
Yeah, moving overseas, getting a property built, finding a new job during a pandemic. That was wild.
That's right. So what were some of the considerations that you had to think about? Because you've purchased existing properties. Now you have to having to consider a range of different things now that you've got a second building on the one property. So what were the things that you were thinking about, in terms of access? You got tenants, all that sort of stuff. What was that like?
Well, interpreting your question one way, like I guess, I'm not sure if this is what you mean by the question, but I went for a brick and slab granny flat at the back of the property. And you'll find, particularly now, there's a lot of even prefabricated, shipping container homes you can chuck on the back of a property. I've got a friend who does that. He's got a very small space and it's a little bit not council approved and it's a bit dodgy. Ooh. It's not quite the way I've wanted to go. But I think I wanted, and why I chose Builders Brisbane over a few other alternatives. And just because you're a friend doesn't mean, or had become a friend during this stage, doesn't mean I'm necessarily going to do like work with you. Like I'm an investor. So, and
you've already built with another builder as well after we worked together. So.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
And so, yeah,
But that was just because they were on the north side or something, or it was a house and land package.
Yeah, and it already came, and they were doing a good deal at the time for the land, and
probably have gone bankrupt since then because it was such a good deal.
Yeah, well, that's a whole nother story. That build, like this one's wild, but I wanted something that would last, and at the time, the council zoning, I couldn't actually strata title or subdivide the actual block of land, but I wanted to build something that would actually look like a proper house and feel like a house, so that I had the option in the future when the council zoning laws inevitably do change due to population density, which is what we need to do in our country, so that I could actually have two separate homes and leave opening some options to extend the property just with the design. Like I could put a couple of extra bedrooms on, not that I necessarily need to do that. But that's why I chose a brick and slab Builders Brisbane home because you were able to do that for a very sharp price. Yeah. And that's exactly what I have the option of doing now. So I'm actually in the stage where I'm thinking of, eventually one day moving back closer to family, friends. Don't quite know when that will be, but I'm in the process of strata titling that because the zoning laws have changed. And now I'm not in a situation where, because this is what can happen with granny flats, banks don't know how to value them very well. It can be very tricky. But when I've got now two properties, that increases my equity by a phenomenal amount.
100%.
And there's a few council fees you got to go through, and then you might have to pay two lots of council rates instead of one. Yeah. But ultimately, like, you're going to make 200K equity.
Well, we very specifically say banks value titles, not buildings.
Yep.
And so it's the title that makes all the difference. So strata titling is a way of doing that. Subdividing is another way of doing that. But you could have a single property with like 5 buildings on it, and they're all renting out, and the bank will say, I don't know what to do with this.
Yeah. And
This is very strange.
it's all about risk for them, and they're going to err on the side of caution.
Exactly.
Which
Yep.
if you find the right valuer, like you can sometimes get lucky with that too.
Yes.
But it does create some complications. So I do think that like it's good to like buy the house first with that granny flat potential, knowing that when the equity increases, you can do I wouldn't sell something. I'd probably, equity draw,
Yeah.
fund that build
right.
like that. That increases the cash flow. So yeah, like when I bought that first property, it probably took me 3 years before I actually built the granny flat, but it was always part of the plan to do that.
Yeah.
And again, why did I choose Builders Brisbane? Because I wanted a quality product that when the zoning laws change, then I could actually strata title it and have two separate dwellings that felt
100%.
and were valued as two separate dwellings. And yeah, like the plan's coming together. Like it's great.
It's fantastic to see something that's been planned previously just get put into motion, and then just watching that motion carry
Yeah.
out. Selling property is always hard because you've got so many exit fees. So yeah, doing a drawdown on the equity and then using that equity, at the moment we're paying 6.2%, let's just say, on a mortgage.
Yeah.
But many of the granny flats that we're building for clients at the moment, between 10 and 12.5% yield.
Oh yeah.
On the build price. So it's ridiculous. You're doubling your money on a yield basis.
Yeah.
And then of course you do the strata title, and you're just massively manufacturing equity there, which you can then just roll into other stuff. And that's the strategy that I myself am employing. Doing a subdivision at the moment, doing the dual key strategy at this place that I just bought, the sight unseen one. Subsequently have walked on it, by the way, guys. So don't get
Nice.
don't freak out too
He's got
much.
there.
I went inside it. But yeah, I think that's a fantastic way to do things. And so this Eagleby property, you've come back to Australia, and then you've had a look and said, well, great, we've got some equity here.
Yeah.
Let's just go again.
Yeah. Well, I was able to do it. I could have bought another investment property in the town where I live, but the yield wouldn't be as good. I've got land there. I already own the land. May as well spend the 200 plus 250, whatever it is, to build the granny flat, and a quality granny flat. I'm going to get an 11%, 10% yield, 12% maybe off the bat.
It's amazing.
And that's going to increase my cash flow.
So with this property in Slacks Creek, what was the total contract price?
Slacks Creek was like pre-COVID. I think it was like 100 and it was somewhere between 150 to 170.
Yeah, I think it was about the 160 something.
Yeah.
And how much is that rented out for at the moment?
Way too low. Because I'm doing it with
Well,
a
what's
friend.
the
the
market
rental,
rent?
The market rent's about 450. I'm giving a friend like maybe even more. Maybe it could be high 400s now.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm renting it to a friend for 390. But
So
I really need to up that.
So that's really a 14.5% yield.
Oh yeah, it is.
Like as we speak, that's insane.
Yeah, it's
like-
very good.
And that's property, 14.5%, and then you're gonna manufacture more equity out of that
Yeah,
with the strata titling, that's just unbelievably incredible.
Yeah.
We just built a 2-story place actually for someone in Slacks Creek. They rented out for $770 a week.
wow.
$770 a week.
Gee, am I pushing? I
mean, that was a 4-bedroom, 2-bathroom, 2-car garage house,
Yeah.
and they rented it actually to a local manufacturing company who needed to bring in workers.
Okay.
Yeah, so it worked out amazing for them. But yeah, huge yield right off the bat. I've only got a few other questions for you, Dan. So we better start walking down this list so we can wrap things up. How important is communication and transparency to you when working with a builder? Maybe there's some compare and contrast between my company, the Builders Brisbane, and the other builder. That
Yeah,
you
well,
dealt
it's all about trust at the end of the day.
Sure. Yeah.
And you build trust through communication and transparency.
Yes.
You hear these horror stories within the industry. I guess I had the advantage of knowing you personally as well as professionally. Although at first, we met on a completely professional basis.
Yes.
Knowing that we had some mutual friends, I think helped as well. And that's why I was able to have that trust. I think, I think for me, you just want to have you want to know that you're getting a good quality product, a sharp deal. There's no like inclusions or lack of inclusions that are going to surprise you at the end. And you want to be able, if you have a question, you want it answered. You might be surprised to know, like, I didn't really, as long as the property is being built and I can see in the contract it's being built on schedule, like I'm pretty happy. Just build the property, all the price.
Very easy man to satisfy.
Well, what else are you going to do? Like, actually, I think we had an issue with the brick color, and then that turned out totally fine. I think it faded pretty quick, or something happened with it. I can't remember.
Oh, it's because when you put the mortar on.
Yeah,
that's a classic with bricks. You put the mortar on, and it's like wiped off.
It lightens
sponge.
it. Yeah.
The mortar is smeared on, so we just do a light acid wash on the brick.
Yeah,
and give it a scrub to bring it back to the actual face brick. Yeah,
but you've got a good quality product.
Like,
so at the end of the day, like I was happy to not try to drive the price down. You know, instead of brick, let's get whatever. Instead of like a slab, let's do it on stumps or something. Because I'm a buy and hold investor. Like, I want to have this property in 30 years. I might even want to give one of my kids one of these properties one day. Like
Baby Josiah, if you're watching this in the future.
Yeah. Just which one? Be careful. Don't hold me to that. But yeah, so I want something that's going to look good in the future. And that is going to hold its value. So
100%.
That's why I went with Builders Brisbane.
Whilst also attaining that sweet depreciation.
Yeah.
Attaining the old classic 1-2 punch of the property investor, getting the capital gains while claiming the depreciation.
Yep.
It feels a little bit dirty, that strategy.
It feels very like your money goes a lot further than you initially realize when you understand how that works. And it's property investment in Australia in particular is wild.
Yeah. Well, you and I are gamers, and it's a bit of a broken strat at the moment.
Yeah, it certainly is.
Probably needs a nerf, but I don't really see devs nerfing it anytime soon. But that's all right. But that being said, I mean, a lot of what you're doing is actually not, let's just say, hinged on the whims of policymakers, and I think that is something that is so amazing, is going into property the way that you've done it is you're really looking for stuff that's undervalued. So there's a few principles we can extract, right? You went in and you manufactured equity from your purchase. That's a fantastic thing.
Yeah.
You took emotion out of the deal. That's another fantastic thing. And then you used obviously your tax, to your advantage. Relationships are key, building a team around you. I'm a huge proponent of that. I've got a fantastic team around me for my property investment stuff, and I've got some people that will really, kick my butt into gear if I've fallen behind on certain metrics that, I've committed to them to hit. And then another classic is using equity and converting that into cash flow. That's an amazing wealth multiplier. And, listening to your story, it seems like you've just nailed all of those principles. Those fundamental principles, and it's not like you're buying in a mining town chasing that, instant, ridiculous yield, and
too risky for me. I can't control.
Yeah,
like with what I've been able to do. There's a few different options available to me. The house is good by itself. Build a granny flat, get the cash flow. Zoning laws have changed. You're able to manufacture your success. And you've got a few different avenues for you to do that. Refinance to draw the equity out rather than to resell, so you don't trigger capital gains. This is interesting. I know we're short for time, but actually I purchased it before we were married, and I put it 99% in my wife's name and 1% in my name. So then we only had to pay 1% stamp duty. That was a little trick that I did. It was hilarious. One of the things. So, because she'd never bought a property before. But once we were married, it doesn't apply. So, I think we were engaged at the time.
She loses her first home buyer status by marrying you.
Yeah.
So, you really are giving up more than your last name, aren't you? When you're in Alex's shoes.
Well, would anyone get married?
That's amazing. And so, how do you stay? I've got a few other questions. So, your future plans for property investment and building projects. Are there anything on the horizon? What do you see yourself doing? How do you stay informed about the property market? and investment opportunities. Those sorts of things tie into each other. And what trends do you see emerging in the property investment sector that potential investors should be aware of?
Yeah, good question.
It's a very future
Yeah.
oriented.
I'm at a stage now where I'm running through a lot of different scenarios in my mind. Having our first child, that does change things a bit, where you start to go, maybe it is time to start selling some properties so I can afford a family home. No, well, that was like my mindset too. But there's a particular area that's close to my family, close to a lot of friends. I wish I'd bought in that area sooner and copped a negative, like, I don't want to buy it's negatively geared, you know. I positively geared or positive cash flow, you know, when you include the tax incentives. And I'm wondering, you know, do I do that, or do I, you know, purchase a property in that area that I can develop and subdivide, and maybe go in with a friend and we end up with 2 blocks of land and 2 houses next to each other.
Yeah.
In terms of my career as well, maybe I'm working as a deputy principal at the moment. Maybe I step it up and move somewhere else where there's an opportunity and delay that further. But it's hard to say. I'm actually in a pretty confused place at the moment with what I want to do in the future.
Well, you do have a 6-month-old baby.
Yeah,
so that's and being in that confused place is very understandable.
But yeah, like, I guess there's a lot of different options available to me. I think I'm just keeping an eye on the market. I'm seeing what's come up. I actually put a contract, or attempted to put a contract in a house recently in that area, missed out by about probably $100,000 or $50,000. And I'm now seeing, should have I paid a bit more for it? I thought it was overpriced. But I guess I'm in this situation where I can, you know, afford to purchase that dream house because of the investment portfolio. So it's great to have the options. Or do I do something stupid like rent in this area and just keep purchasing more investment properties on the side? Like,
well, yeah,
it could be the.
I mean, if the yield
option.
is horrible, right?
Yeah.
Look at some place and it's got a 2% yield.
Yeah.
And you think, why the heck would anyone purchase this? You're just banking on capital gains the entire time. Like, who knows? Maybe it's a good time to purchase when the yield is horrible, but I don't know. This is not investment.
Yeah, well, I'm just doing a lot of thinking, keeping an eye on the market.
Yeah.
Trying to upskill myself into, like, I've done, you know, small property development, if you want to call it that, but maybe to secure this next phase of what I'm wanting to do with property, I have to think even more creatively. I think future trends for property investors, I think, doing what we're talking about here, creating equity through granny flats, dual key places. Some people are really into, like, even situations where, like, every room is rented out to increase yields further.
It's pretty hardcore.
Yeah, it's not something that I'm at this stage wanting to go down, but that's certainly a trend that is emerging, and if you can learn to manage that well, then I think there's untapped potential there.
Okay, well, we'll move on to the last question. What's one piece of advice you'd give to someone just starting out in property investment?
It's what I said before, that research mitigates risk. So do a lot of research, listen to a lot of podcasts, get a team of people around you, go to property networking events, be mindful that some people will educate you towards a certain strategy or a certain product that they're trying to sell to you.
Yep.
I hope you wouldn't think that anything like that's happening today. I'm just sharing honestly and raw about.
Well, to be honest, it is. You know, I'm a I'm a builder, so and I'm interviewing one of my clients to see, you know,
that's true,
how it went.
So get a different range of perspectives. Like, take everything with a grain of salt in that, and then decide from all the information that's available to you what the best strategy is for you with your circumstances, with your network, and go from there. But at the same time, like, don't always be in that stage of research, because I've definitely seen some friends who they want to have every duck lined up. Like, you're eventually going to have to step out, maybe as an act of faith, going, I'm going to back myself and I'm going to figure out some of the problems that I run into. when I run into them. And that's also
Yes.
been like a mindset that I've had. Like I've researched and I've done, but like I've gone, no, now it's time to buy. Like I thought I was going to start in 2 years, but this grant is expiring, so I'm going to do it now. A lot earlier than I should have. Oh, this property on the north side that I built. Oh, my friend who was going to do a joint venture with has pulled out because he's lost his job. Okay, what can I do now? Okay, I'll just buy the land, and then I'll hold it for 6 months until I can build up enough savings to build. Oh, there's a big tree on the property. It's going to do some redamage. Okay, I'll go through the council and get rid of this protected tree to it. Ridiculous expense. Like, oh man, no, it's impossible to get rid of this tree, but I did it. But so it's just you got to do your research, but you've also got to step out when the time is right.
Yeah, I found that the key is relationships, and you mentioned that, right?
Yeah,
this council situation.
Yeah,
there's a person you speak to. You find that person.
Yeah.
And you talk to them, and you make your issue their issue.
Yeah.
That bank that you went to.
Yeah.
Who is that manager? Who's this person in this area who can help me?
Yes.
Because organizations like councils, like banks, they are simply collections of people. And there are certain people in there who are going to be under par, and there are going to be other people that are star performers. Find your star performers. Another one that I use, and you probably do this intuitively, is finding someone who is where you want to be rather than someone who is speaking the things that you want to hear.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's a massive principle. So my accountant is where I want to be. They are running multiple businesses. I think he's got like 80 something properties, a whole bunch of, sounds like a great accountant.
Yeah.
Other mentors of mine, they are where I want to be in the future. So yeah. And so I think working with property investment professionals who are in that space, say like a builder, it's like, oh, you're a builder and you're building investment properties for people. How many do you have?
Yeah.
It would be very suspect if they had, only one or two, or heck, none. It would be very strange.
Yeah, they're not the person who's going to know how to structure things. They're not walking the walk.
Yeah.
And if you meet these people, this is some advice that I had. Just say, hey, I'd love to get to know how you do what you do. Can I take you out and pay, obviously, for a lunch one time?
100%.
When does it suit you?
Yeah.
And that advice has been, brilliant for me.
Yes.
Because if you don't have a network, you need to start somewhere. You'll actually find that there's people love sharing about their expertise and what they've done.
Yeah.
The questions don't get asked enough, especially in our Australian culture. Maybe it's tall poppy syndrome or something, but like so many of my close friends have never had a conversation on any level of depth to what we're doing about things that I find very exciting. Like they just don't know, and maybe they don't care, or it's not who they are. But so I'm actually very hungry to share what I've learned with others.
Yeah.
It's not, as you might presume, the other way around.
I found that as well. The mentality of, let me buy you lunch extends even further. Let me carry your bags at the golf course. Who knows what you pick up in 5-10 minutes. Let me caddy your golf bag. Something like that. It's like, allow me to follow you. I wanna, get some of your dust on me.
Yeah.
And see what you're about. And walk the walk that you walk. And yeah, I think that's like an amazing principle. So, anyways, yeah, thank you so much for your time, Dan.
Oh, it's been great chatting with you, Sean.
Yeah. I actually discovered some things about you that I didn't know. Your initial property purchase and the fact that you used an engagement ring down payment for your property. Man, what a blessing that first woman was, hey?
Oh, yeah. No, fantastic. Best decision she
Got
ever
you
made.
into saving money. Oh, that's amazing. All right. Well, thanks for your time, mate.
No, brilliant. Thank you.